2020 makes it 112 years that Trinidad and Tobago have commercially been involved in oil and gas. Now, we've seen changes over the years from the focus shifting from oil, more to gas, to earlier this year when we actually had the phenomenon of people literally paying persons to go their barrels of oil, not necessarily in Trinidad and Tobago though. But Neisa Ramdass is an energy analyst who also writes and blogs, and she joins us to help us make some sense of some of the things we should be looking at on a personal and national perspective. So, good evening, Neisa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me at this time.
Now, I'm very happy that we have the opportunity to speak one, and the fact that it will be, we'll speak more than once, so that we don't need to try to pack all the information in 20 minutes. So we're starting from brass tacks. So I want you to give us a little definition of upstream versus downstream, please, as it relates to oil and gas.
Okay, so we have this, we call it the natural gas value chain in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's split into the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream. So I think that most people within the sector have a technical knowledge and understanding of this. But I think it's important for the general public to also understand this. So I'll give it in a very simplified way. The upstream is basically when you extract resources out of the ground, the earth, the ocean. So you literally go extract oil, extract gas, and then you pipe that down into the midstream, where this is where NGC Phoenix Park comes into play. And they are, basically we call them the aggregators. So they are responsible for the transmission and the transportation of the gas to the downstream, which can be found on the Point Neisa Industrial Estate, also in Point Fortin with Atlantic LNG. And the downstream is responsible for taking these resources and they manufacture it into things such as ammonia, methanol, liquefied natural gas that we then export and generate revenue from. If I were to backtrack, I just realized that I left off the companies involved in the upstream, which would include major players that we hear all the time, the BP, the Shell, the EOG, quite recently, De Novo, BHP. So these are the companies that literally make the upstream first. They constitute the upstream. Then we go down to the midstream, as I said before, which is Phoenix Park Gas Producers. We have the NGC, National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. And then we head down to the downstream and the companies, well, we know all the companies on the Point Neisa Industrial Estate. To name a few, we can name IPSL, we can name Nutrien, we can name Methanex, we can name Yara. There's so much. There's Point Neisa Nitrogen. So there's so many companies involved in the downstream as well.
Now, looking at those factors that we can control, and because we don't have that much control on a very hands-on level with the upstream, as you described, the big players, we're not necessarily there. Now, if we're looking at energy efficiency, because all across the board people are looking at how they can do things remotely, how they can do things in a manner that is more efficient, what is energy efficiency?
Okay, so that's a great start, defining energy efficiency, because we need to know what this is if we choose to adopt these techniques and tactics to become more energy efficient. So basically put, energy efficiency means using less energy to perform a simple task, right? So in order to do that, we need to become more aware and cognizant of our energy usage, and that in itself would eliminate energy waste. Now, there are multiple reasons as to why we should become more energy efficient. The benefits include, as we all know, the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. We could also say natural gas optimization. So if a plant is more energy efficient, there won't be any wastage of natural gas, this precious commodity that we depend so much on. There'll be an increase in energy security, which also ties in with natural gas usage optimization. And this is something that would hit home for everyone. We save money. So we lower our costs with regards to household power bills, whether it's power bills in your business, we also do that on a whole economic level as well.
Now, before we get to the domestic level, if we keeping it on the estate, what kind of changes, tweaks, amendments would be useful to be able to get a little more bang for our buck? Because one of the things we hear about is there being a shortage of gas or natural gas. So how do we use what we have and make it stretch a little further?
Okay, so before we get to the energy efficiency within the downstream, we need to discuss the current state of the downstream. And you did touch on that just now, where you spoke about the lower than usual natural gas production. So we've seen that in recent months, within the past year, probably more than a year, the government have made announcements stating that projects will be coming online. And a few of the key names we keep hearing: Cassia project, Matapal, we hear Ruby is coming on, these kind of projects, right? But these projects aren't online as yet, which means natural gas production is still not where it should be. And from that, we've seen plants operating at a lower efficiency. So whatever their contracted gas agreement is, because that production of natural gas is low, they're not receiving the amount of natural gas stated in their contracts. So that's a twofold problem. One, the NGC would then have to compensate for not delivering the amount of natural gas stipulated in the contract. And two, plants will then be operating at a lower efficiency. So if it is that they're set to put out X amount of ammonia or X amount of methanol or X amount of LNG, and they don't receive the stipulated amount of natural gas to do so, they'll be operating at a lower efficiency, which means we have lower products, natural gas, petrochemical products being produced, which means there's a lower revenue because less products are being exported. Now, I want to bring to your attention that we're in the top 2 producers of ammonia and methanol worldwide. And I think we're the top 7th or 8th, I'm not sure if that changed recently, LNG producer. So it's a very competitive market. And to retain your market share and compete within that market, you need to be constantly producing at this state. Otherwise, it really won't end well.
Now, with that in mind, though, and looking at the gas agreements, if there's a shortage, who gets it? And I say that, is it companies on the estate? Is it other people who are off the estate? Is it personal or domestic use? What governs the rationing of gas when you have gas agreements and lower than optimal levels?
So the reason I responded with a smile is because, so first and foremost, you will always allocate natural gas to the power generation sector. Otherwise, the country is in darkness for however long. We can't operate these sort of stuff, right? But there's no stipulated or regulated way to allocate natural gas. And that is where the NGC comes in. And I think many people within the industry have called for transparency with regards to that. But I do understand that it's a business transaction. And in that essence, you may not always get the transparency that you would so desire to see.
So moving from mid to down, or you were starting to talk about being more efficient midstream before we even start to tackle downstream.
So what is happening in Point Lisas especially, recently there was this agreement with many companies within the estate. They signed on to this energy efficiency agreement. And what it does is they're trying to optimize the use of not only electricity, but the natural gas they receive, make sure their machinery is above standard, everything is operating well. They also try to be more energy efficient when contracting services, their logistics, these sort of stuff, right? What we also need to mention is that I'm not sure if you ever heard, like there are lots of shutdowns happening, and shutdowns happen because there's maintenance on plants. A lot of the plants are a bit old because they've been up for a while. So in order for the plant to run more efficiently, efficiently, apologies, they would need to take down all operations, ramp it down, and then do maintenance on the plants, then move forward. However, some plants may not be able to survive that, and the economic cost of doing that may not pan out well. And we could see that happen. Well, this is what was reported to happen with the Yarra plant. It was very old, so they decided to bring it down. We saw that Train 1 in Atlantic, they also brought it down for maintenance because it was very old. So I think this is a key part. Companies need to conduct energy audits and these sort of things to make sure that their entire operations from plant to their office to everything is running efficiently and there's no wastage at all.
So we take a quick break. We come back with more. We are speaking with Neisa Ramdass. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking on energy and the way forward with energy analyst Neisa Ramdass. Now, Neisa, moving from midstream to downstream, what are some of the things that we need to be looking at? Because you said that plants on the estate would have signed on to this agreement to become more efficient. What are some of the factors that they're looking forward to, or are there markers that say, okay, by this time we need to do this, working towards becoming more efficient?
I would like to state that this is not in any way, I want to say it's not law. So it's an agreement, but it's not something that is, they have to do this by this stipulated amount of time. It's something that they sign on to, they take account of what's going on within their organization, and they work forward based on it. I think another way in which energy efficiency can be incorporated into the entire energy value chain, natural gas value chain, is if a lot of people have been pitching the idea of diversifying the energy mix. So what they mean by that is, let's say we have a stipulated amount of natural gas going to power generation, right? How about we implement renewable energy to generate power? And that displaced gas, we can now pump back into our downstream to produce that methanol, to produce that ammonia, to produce that LNG, and then we can then increase the revenues.
Now, with regard to that renewable technology, what are some of the things that we need to look at? And I say that because Guyana has Kaieteur Falls. We don't have a Kaieteur Falls to be able to say, to even think really about saying possibly we want to generate electricity using water technology. In our specific situation, what are some of those types of renewable energy that may make a little more sense to our specific situation?
Okay, so with regards to seeing a best fit with renewables in our country, you need to do a large amount of research. You need to see what works best, what would be the best fit, right? And a lot of those studies have come out of Trinidad. And obviously, we're in the tropics, so obviously solar would make more sense. So we have been looking into solar. I know there were a couple of studies that suggested offshore wind, where we look at the northeast coast with regards to Togo and that area. That's northeast. Sorry, my direction is really off. But yeah, these are the types of renewable energy that would most make sense in Trinidad. But it's not that we wake up one day and say, okay, guys, we're going to pop a solar panel and this solves all our problems. We have so much to do. And to me, it seems that we're operating behind the curve because many countries within the Caribbean have made it work. And why have they made it work is because they don't have a choice. They weren't blessed with oil and natural gas and a thriving petrochemical sector, right? They have to import their energy. And to cut costs, they said, you know what, let's make use of what we do have, which is wind, which is solar, which is geothermal. These are their blessings. So they made use of it. And if they did this, why can't we implement solar and wind within our own country? But in order for that to happen, there needs to be policy reform, legislation reform. Recently, they announced that Shell and BP signed on to, they submitted a proposal when there was a call for like a RFQ in 2018, the ministry put out, and BP and Shell proposal was accepted. And I think it was this year, February, the Prime Minister indicated that we are going to proceed with that renewable energy initiative. So we've seen it happen on a large scale, but we also need to accept that sometimes people may want to implement, let's say, a solar panel on their house, a solar panel on their business, small business. And we need to have the policy and legislation in place to support this.
But that brings up the question, what is in it for me? If I want to, if I say, okay, well, solar may be the way to go because we have a great deal of sun. How much will it cost in the short term? And if it costs more than just paying my TNTech bill, when will it start to level out so that I can see the return on my investment?
Okay, so this is a really great question, and this is where our subsidies come into play. So we've also been blessed with subsidies on our power generation, our electricity prices, right? And I think that encourages a lot of wastage at times. We have one of, I think, the cheapest electricity rates in the Western Hemisphere. We're at 4 US cents per kilowatt hour, right? And I think if we have been, I don't want to say spoiled, but we have been paying less for electricity, many won't be inclined to say, you know what, let me make this sustainable switch to solar, or this sustainable switch to whatever you decide to do, right? I think the electricity subsidy needs to be reformed at some point, because I'm not sure how long we can continue to sustain this. And I think that solar is now a lot more attractive because the price to implement it has dropped over the years. So a couple of years ago, let's say 10 years ago, it was way more expensive than it is now. And I think that is a key. So let's say your startup cost is lowered, one, and two, in return, you would have to pay less over time. And this again is where legislation and policy reform comes into place, because there's something called the feed-in tariff, right? So this would allow small power producers to sell whatever excess electricity they generate with their renewables back to the TNTech grid. And that way you kind of cancel off costs, right? And these little things, I think, can encourage people more to lead a more sustainable, energy efficient, inclusive of renewable life.
No, you don't want to use the word spoil, but I will use it because there was a point in time I was in a different jurisdiction, and I used AC for 1 month, and then I saw the bill, and the next month I was putting on the fan and thinking cool thoughts because trust me, I wasn't able with it again. But in terms of that, where do people get the information though? Say, so you're talking about the technology is a little cheaper, so there's a shorter period of time before you start to get that return on investment. But where do people go? Who can people contact to get that information about the technology that is there in the first place, regardless of whether or not the return on investment is short or not?
I think this is probably our biggest barrier with regards to any sort of culture shift or culture change in Trinidad and Tobago. Sometimes we may lack in the area of public education and awareness. And I think that sometimes the information is available, just it may not be able to connect with the reader or the listener. So you want this information to be digestible, and you want them to say, you know what, I understand this and this makes sense. And now they're able to form an opinion on their own. And I think that there are many organizations that put out information, or at least trying to. I've seen the ministry do it a couple of times. I started my blog because of it, because I felt like a lot of people my age weren't understanding the going in and going out of the energy sector. They didn't understand exactly what was happening. And I think it's the responsibility of people themselves to kind of say, you know what, I want to lead a more sustainable life. I want to lead a more energy efficient life. What can I do? Let me go and let me research. I think a major key as well is implementing this into our education system, because a lot of people my age would have only heard about energy and oil and gas and energy efficiency and conservation at probably a tertiary level. And I think it's harder for people to break out of this mindset at a later age when compared to if you teach this to a kid, let's say in first year, from first year go up, you teach them about something as simple as switching off the lights, unplugging appliances, like recycling, these things where they grow into this culture where we do have to develop this beach with a big stick mentality where somebody needs to tell you, yo, take off your lights or unplug your appliances or don't run your AC 24/7. I think that is a major, major key.
Now, in terms of moving that subsidy, how would you like to see it adjusted? Because my perception is that if the subsidy is adjusted, people will say, okay, well, water more than flour, let me look at this alternative a little closer. But are there specific points or immediate things that can be done with regard to it?
I think, okay, so again, this is where public education and awareness comes into place. We've seen the subsidy on fuel get adjusted several times over the years, and yet still people don't understand the need for it. They still feel like the government is sending up the price of super and premium and all these things, and that's not the case. They're not sending up the price of it, they're just reducing the subsidy on it. And I think if this is clear to the public, they might still hold a grudge, but they might at least understand. I think we need to connect with people on their level where they, I want to say understand, but more feel responsible to do something, a call to action where they say, you know what, if I need to pay a couple more cents, this just means that I need to watch how I'm using my appliances. I need to watch how I'm running my house. Like if I'm building a house, let me put in some more windows, some skylights, like simple things where people can say, you know what, I want to be responsible for this.
I guess this is what part of what people describe as being or having a resource curse rather. I remember also one person saying that Trinidad and Tobago is oil rich and money foolish. But at the same time, this is a conversation for us to continue another time. And we want to thank you in advance for agreeing to another conversation. Neisa Ramdass, energy analyst. We want to thank you so much. And we want to thank you as well for tuning in. On behalf of the entire news team, I'm DK Roster. Good night.